The debris swirled in lazy spirals, a fractured dance of mangled titanium and blackened composite panels. Through the Osprey's forward window, it resembled an exploded hive of mechanical insects drifting silently in the emptiness of Helios 7's orbital cemetery. Commander Nix Varden scratched the edge of his chin, where the stubble always outpaced his sonic razor by at least 12 hours. "I thought you promised this region would be deserted," he grumbled. "Correction," replied Aurea from the navigation terminal, her synthetic voice unnervingly cheerful. "I said statistically deserted. Statistics are fickle companions." "Yeah, well, remind me not to trust the odds again." The emergency signal was faint, pulsing erratically across channels like an intoxicated ghost in the machine. Most commanders would have ignored it, but Nix possessed that self-destructive curiosity unique to former cargo pilots, with nothing more to sacrifice and just enough compassion to invite trouble. He guided the Osprey forward with a controlled thrust, reverse propulsion flaring amber against the void. Among the wreckage, something stirred. Initially, he dismissed it as merely a power conduit, expending its final energy. Then the form shifted. Humanoid, approximately 165 centimeters tall, skin glimmering subtly beneath the vessel's searchlights. She stood amidst the field of destruction, barefoot on a shattered bulkhead, hair streaming in zero gravity, eyes gleaming like twin fragments of cosmic crystal, and ears elongated, curved like scimitars. Elegant if you appreciated the deadly Fae aesthetic. When the airlock opened, she didn't flee. She walked in, stance squared, chin elevated, a feral creature in a borrowed form. Nix raised both palms slowly. "Hello, I'm Commander Varden. Don't touch me, and I definitely won't attempt that. I'm not your trophy." He blinked. "Actually, I wasn't planning to say that, but now I'm wondering if that's been an issue previously." She sniffed, crossing her arms, revealing faint bioluminescent patterns flowing beneath her skin like a cartography of distant solar systems. Humans always see pointed ears and immediately it's "who's a precious thing?" and "can you perform tricks?" Nix opened his mouth, closed it, then glanced sideways at Aurea, who had just approached on her mobility platform carrying a medical scanner in a spare flight suit. "Should I offer her a snack?" Aurea whispered. "She'll eliminate you." "I welcome release from this employment." She advanced further into the vessel, casting a penetrating gaze around as though she owned everything in sight. "Where am I?" The Osprey, salvage class patched with adhesive and wishful thinking. "You're secure for now." "I don't do secure," she replied, then promptly collapsed face first onto the deck plating. The Osprey's artificial gravity fluctuated as Nix hauled the unconscious figure to the medical bay. His muscles strained against her unexpected density. She looked lithe but weighed like reinforced combat armor. Aurea hovered nervously behind them, scanning continuously with a handheld medical probe that emitted a series of increasingly concerned beeps. "Fascinating biological composition," the synthetic intoned. "Her cellular structure appears to be reinforced with some kind of metallic lattice. Microfilaments of, I believe it's stellarite alloy, are integrated throughout her musculature." Nix grunted as he positioned her on the examination platform. "Is that why she weighs like a small shuttle?" "Precisely. Designed for durability in combat scenarios, I presume." Aurea's scanner flashed red at the base of the stranger's skull. "Commander, I'm detecting an integrated neural interface, military grade. Someone wanted to maintain direct control." Nix's expression darkened. "Can you disable it?" "It appears dormant, possibly damaged. Attempting to tamper with it might trigger defensive protocols." "Monitor it then. Let me know if it activates." Nix studied the unconscious figure, noting how, even in unconsciousness, her features remained tense, alert, as though some part of her was always ready for attack. He wondered what kind of existence that must be, to never truly rest, to always anticipate the next threat. As he turned to leave, the lights dimmed momentarily, power draining from non-essential systems to accommodate the medical bay's enhanced life support. The Osprey was an aging vessel not designed for refugees with exotic biology, especially not ones that might be walking weapons. 2 hours later, she awakened in the medical bay, furious and cursing in a language the translator hesitated to process. Nix leaned forward, stimulant beverage in hand. You lost consciousness. Probably from exposure to vacuum, no offense, but you are remarkably high maintenance. I never requested maintenance, she snapped, attempting to sit upright and failing spectacularly. And I swear, if you attached a tracking device to me while I was unconscious— Nix raised both hands. I didn't, though Arya fashioned one for amusement. I embellished it, Arya said proudly. It says sovereign death gaze. Her lip twitched slightly, perhaps. She looked away. My name is Lyria. I'm Asterai. Nix raised an eyebrow. Thought your species was extinct. We prefer strategically uncommon. He smiled faintly. Welcome aboard, Lyria. Don't worry. We don't employ restraints here. She glared, then slowly pulled the thermal covering tighter around her shoulders. I'll terminate you if you try. Noted. Outside, the debris field continued its endless drift, cold and indifferent. Inside, something dangerous and perhaps somewhat lost had settled in the corner of his vessel. The Osprey wasn't exactly designed for passengers, especially not luminescent alien fugitives with trauma responses and a habit of baring their teeth when addressed before caffeine consumption. Nevertheless, Lyria had established herself as a presence. Not a presence like a crew member or a passenger, more like a mildly radioactive sculpture that occasionally moved and threatened people in multiple languages. Nix observed her through the open mess hall entrance as she perched atop the galley counter like a particularly vengeful gargoyle, silently consuming a protein bar with all the suspicion of someone who believed chocolate might be weaponized deception. You know, he said casually, we have seating options. She didn't look up. You believe seating is harmless? They're engineered for your skeletal structure. I've dislocated my coccyx twice on your torture furniture. You don't possess a coccyx. She tore off a segment of the bar with her teeth, chewed deliberately, then said, not anymore. Arya glided into the doorway behind Nix, holding a data tablet and humming a melody from a 23rd century musical adaptation of Predator vs. Parliament. Commander, Arya said brightly, someone published a retrieval alert on the interlink. Category 5 biological asset premium compensation. Nix sighed, and let me guess, the image bears a striking resemblance to our long-eared nutrition demon. Lyria slowly turned her head. Nutrition? What? Term of endearment, Nix said. On Earth, it's affectionate. I despise Earth. Most do. He took the tablet from Arya, scrolling through the listing. The bounty image was pixelated but unmistakable. The ears alone could have earned her a starring role in entertainment media. The listing was sparse on details, but emphasized dangerous genetic anomalies, lethal engineering, and may generate energy fields hazardous to electronics and small companion animals. Small companion animals? Lyria asked flatly. You did dispel the beverage synthesizer by glaring at it too intensely, Arya offered. It displeased me. Nix pinched the bridge of his nose. All right, so the good news is we know who's pursuing you. The bad news is we don't know their vessel count, weapons capabilities, or how enthusiastically they enjoy hunting sentients for sport. She jumped down from the counter, landing with feline grace. I'm not afraid. Of course not, but you should maintain mild concern regarding Arya's culinary attempts. I prepared stew recently, Arya said. Everyone survived. Barely, Nix muttered. Over the next cycle, the Osprey dove deeper into the SETI Nebula, its aging stealth systems engaged to maximum capacity. The nebula's charged particles created a natural interference pattern that helped mask their energy signature, but also played havoc with the ship's systems. In the engine room, Nix found himself lying beneath the primary power coupling, arms deep in a tangle of circuitry that sparked dangerously close to his face. Arya, reduce power to section 5 by 30%, he called out. The lights dimmed accordingly as he carefully rerouted a damaged relay. A shadow fell across him, and he glanced up to find Lyria watching with unnerving intensity. Your ship is primitive, she stated, crouching beside him. Functional, he corrected. There's a difference. Primitive and functional aren't mutually exclusive. She reached past him without warning, her slender fingers navigating the chaotic mess of wiring with surprising precision. This connection is inefficient. Your power loss is approximately 23%. Nix raised an eyebrow. You're an engineer now. I understand systems, she replied, repositioning three connectors in rapid succession. The persistent hum of the engine shifted in pitch, settling into a smoother, more consistent rhythm. Military design includes comprehensive technical knowledge. Efficient weapons must understand what they destroy. There was something in her tone, a bitterness perhaps, or resignation, that made Nick study her more carefully. Is that how you see yourself, as a weapon? Lyria's luminescent patterns pulsed briefly before dimming. It's what I was created to be. And what do you want to be? She stared at him as though the question made no sense, her otherworldly eyes narrowing slightly. After a long moment, she simply stood and walked away, leaving Nix alone with the newly optimized engine and the unsettling impression that no one had ever asked her that question before. Later in the vessel's lower section, Lyria paced the length of the former cargo hold, now repurposed into a personal domain. She hadn't requested it, but Nix had instructed the crew to remove the spare containers and allocate her the space. She hadn't expressed gratitude. She did, however, bite one fewer person that week. Nix leaned against the frame of the open entryway. You were engineered, weren't you? He asked quietly. Not born. Her pacing halted. She didn't turn around. The Asterai were created during the Obsidian conflict. Bioweapons designed to be rapid, intelligent, obedient. They achieved 2 out of 3. You weren't obedient. Not to them. A lengthy silence ensued. She touched one of the walls lightly, fingers tracing an extended fracture in the hull. I escaped. They attempted to eradicate us all once hostilities ceased. Called us volatile. Nix nodded slowly. And now they want to reclaim what remains. She turned then, expression unreadable. You believe I'm dangerous? He offered her a measured smile. Absolutely. You're a luminous, emotionally repressed genetic superweapon with sarcasm complications. Her lip twitched. Flatterer. And yet, he said, you haven't eliminated me yet. The consortium created us to infiltrate enemy installations, Lyria said suddenly, breaking the silence. Our bioluminescence can be controlled, suppressed completely when necessary. We can pass as human with minor cosmetic adjustments. She gestured toward her elongated ears. These were intentional. A psychological weapon. Studies showed that humanoid figures with slight abnormalities provoke greater fear responses than complete aliens. The uncanny valley weaponized. Nix listened without interrupting, understanding the rarity of her voluntary disclosure. We were released in batches of 7, genetically linked to operate as tactical units. I was the 7th of my batch, the infiltrator. Her voice grew distant. The others were built for direct combat. I was designed to blend in, to earn trust, to access secure facilities. She looked at her hands, the faint patterns beneath her skin pulsing slightly. When the war ended, the consortium decided we knew too much, had seen too many classified installations. We were scheduled for decommissioning. Nix's jaw tightened. Execution, you mean? Resource reclamation was the official term. My batch escaped together, but we were hunted. One by one they were captured or killed. I've been alone for 3 standard years. The vulnerability in her admission hung in the air between them, fragile and unexpected. Nix wanted to offer comfort, but sensed that pity would be received as an insult. Instead, he simply nodded. Well, you're not alone now, even if your current company consists of a salvage captain with questionable decision-making skills and a synthetic with an unhealthy attachment to pastries. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile, but closer than he'd seen before. Your decision-making is beyond questionable, Commander. It's catastrophic. That's fair, he conceded with a slight grin. But it did lead me to you, so I'm counting it as a net positive. That night, when the vessel dimmed for its artificial nocturnal cycle, Nix passed through the common area and noticed Lyria curled near the fusion core's thermal vents, covering wrapped around her like a cocoon. She wasn't sleeping. Her eyes glowed faintly, but she didn't hiss or project anything when he walked past. He interpreted that as improvement. In his own quarters, Nix called up the ship's security feed, cycling through empty corridors until he found Arya in the maintenance bay, meticulously analyzing samples of material salvaged from the debris field where they'd found Lyria. Anything interesting? He asked through the comm. Several anomalies, Arya replied without looking up. The debris contains trace elements consistent with consortium military-grade cloaking technology. However, the configuration is unusual, modified for prolonged operation in deep space. You think they were hunting her specifically, not just responding to an accidental encounter? The evidence suggests a targeted operation, Commander. The wreckage pattern indicates an ambush formation. Nix frowned. How would they know where to find her? Unknown. However, I've detected unusual energy fluctuations in Lyria's neural patterns while she's in rest mode. They create a distinctive signature that might be traceable with sophisticated equipment. You're saying she's broadcasting her location? Not deliberately, it appears to be a function of her design, perhaps intended as a failsafe to locate deployed units. Nix rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. Can we shield it somehow? I'm developing a dampening field that might help. However, it would require her cooperation to implement. She won't like that. No, Arya agreed. She most certainly will not. The synthetic paused, then added with uncharacteristic hesitation. Commander, there's something else. The neural patterns, they're evolving, changing in ways inconsistent with her programming parameters. Meaning what? Meaning she's becoming something her creators never intended. Something unpredictable. Nix thought about Lyria's fierce independence, her struggle against her own design. Good, he said finally. Let's help her keep it that way. The Osprey trembled under an energy pulse as the vessel lurched sideways through the chaotic rings of Nazaro, a planet renowned for three things: illicit propulsion systems, provocative zero-gravity performances, and the most hazardous navigation obstacles this side of a quantum anomaly festival. Outside, the rings sparkled like suspended confetti, if confetti had the unfortunate tendency to shred vessels into fragments. Inside, Bedlam had taken a momentary respite. Nix stumbled into the bridge, clutching his ribcage. Status nominal, Arya reported in that excessively tranquil tone that suggested either confidence or suppressed excitement. If by nominal you mean our defensive systems are reduced to 30%, our navigation system is compromised. And the only barrier between us and molecular disintegration is your remarkable ability to improvise. Comforting. Nix dropped into the pilot's seat and adjusted the controls with the gentle precision of someone attempting not to disturb a sleeping predator. Where's Lyria? Threatening the electrical junction, Arya said. She's convinced it insulted her. It did discharge sparks at her previously, Nix muttered. I'll record it as justified defense. The vessel shuddered again as another energy pulse rolled through space, this one stronger and with an unmistakable pattern. Nix's fingers tightened around the steering mechanism. They're attempting to disable us without rupturing the hull. They want her alive. Or at minimum still partially functional, Arya added helpfully. The pursuing consortium vessel was sleek and predatory, its hull adorned with the distinctive golden insignia that had become synonymous with corporate militarization throughout the outer systems. Its weapons were precision instruments, designed to incapacitate rather than destroy, the tools of hunters, not warriors. As another targeted pulse rocked the Osprey, Nix swore under his breath. The nebula's natural interference wasn't providing enough cover, and their aging engines couldn't outpace the military-grade propulsion systems closing in behind them. He needed a different strategy, something unexpected. Arya, what's our proximity to the Nazaro gravity well? Approximately 63 seconds at current velocity, Commander. However, I strongly advise against reverse thrusters on my mark, full power to forward shields. Commander, the probability of successful. Just do it! Nix watched the tactical display, calculating timing against their rapidly diminishing options. The consortium vessel maintained its pursuit, drawing closer with each passing second, confidence ardent in its aggressive approach. They think we're running for the outer rings, Nix muttered. Let's prove them wrong. Just as the pursuing vessel prepared another disabling pulse, Nix shouted, Mark! The Osprey's engine screamed in protest as the reverse thrusters engaged, abruptly slowing their forward momentum. The unexpected maneuver caught their pursuer off guard, forcing them to swerve sharply to avoid collision. Their precision targeting disrupted, the pulse fired wide, dissipating harmlessly into space. In that moment of confusion, Nix engaged the main engines at full capacity, directing the Osprey into a steep dive toward Nazoro's inner rings, the dense, unpredictable zone most pilots avoided entirely. Your calculated risk borders on suicidal, Arya observed, her synthetic voice somehow conveying both admiration and alarm. Only borders? Nix grinned tightly. I must be getting cautious in my old age. Lyria burst into the bridge like atmospheric lightning in a flight suit, her hair still crackling with static, her eyes blazing. Tell me those weren't consortium markings on that scout vessel. They were, Nix said, not diverting his attention from the sensor display. 3 vessels, light armament, greater velocity than ours. She scowled. Velocity is irrelevant when outmaneuvered. Excellent, Joe, he said. You're volunteering. Her smile was predatory. Move. He complied, more from instinct than trust, and she slid into the pilot's position with a fluidity that was unsettling, as though the vessel recognized her. Her fingers danced across the controls, redirecting power, recalibrating engines mid-trajectory, and muttering insults in Asterai. Are our survival prospects improving? Considerably, Nix said, watching as the Osprey twisted through the rings in a frenzied spiral that somehow evaded incoming fire while simultaneously nearly causing him to vomit. One of the consortium vessels clipped a fragment of crystalline debris. Nazarian ring matter was infamous for its density and spun away into oblivion, venting atmosphere. Lyria released a small, satisfied sound. Nix blinked at her. Remind me never to dispute your judgment while possessing sharp implements. You're learning. Once they achieved clearance, she guided the vessel behind one of the fractured moons for concealment. As the Osprey stabilized into orbit, Nix exhaled deeply, still anticipating another impact that didn't materialize. You've piloted before, he said. Military conditioning. I was created knowing how to navigate. Asterai neural structures are optimized for pattern recognition and predictive simulation. Flight is intuitive. Arya emitted a thoughtful electronic tone. So, you're comparable to a lethal stellar pigeon. She narrowed her eyes. I'm unfamiliar with that entity, but if it's derogatory, I'll incinerate your processing core. Understood. Pigeons are majestic. The encounter had left the Osprey wounded. Diagnostic panels throughout the ship flashed amber and red, indicating systems operating at reduced capacity or failing entirely. In the small engineering bay, Nix and Lyria worked in unexpected harmony, their movements choreographed around each other without need for verbal coordination. She handled the delicate circuitry with the precision of a surgeon, while he focused on the structural repairs, his larger hands better suited to manipulating the damaged hull components. The consortium doesn't typically deploy this level of resources for a single escaped asset, Lyria said, not looking up from the power relay she was reconstructing. What aren't you telling me about your value to them? Nix hesitated, considering whether to share Arya's findings about her unique neural emissions. Arya detected unusual energy patterns in your neural activity. They might be using it to track you. He expected anger, perhaps accusation, but instead, Lyria grew very still. The beacon, she whispered. They said it was deactivated during my final calibration. Can it be removed? Not without significant risk. It's integrated with my primary neural structure. She met his gaze, her expression hardening. You should have informed me immediately. I wasn't certain until now. And now that you are, the unspoken question hung between them. Would he surrender her to save his ship? Nix held her gaze steadily. Now we find a way to block the signal permanently. Relief flickered across her features, so briefly he might have imagined found it. That would require technology beyond your vessel's capabilities. Then we'll acquire it. He returned to his repairs, his tone casual, as though they weren't discussing experimental neurotechnology and defying one of the most powerful military corporations in the sector. I know someone on Meridian Station who specializes in consortium countermeasures. We can reach her in 3 days if we push the engines. Lyria studied him with that penetrating gaze that always made him feel transparent. Why are you helping me? It was a simple question, but one without a simple answer. Nix considered and discarded several responses before settling on honesty. Because you deserve to choose your own path. because no one should be hunted for how they were made, and because, he grinned suddenly, I've grown oddly fond of having a terrifying alien with anger management issues threatening my electrical systems. She didn't smile, not exactly, but something in her posture softened. Your reasoning is illogical, but acceptable. Coming from Lyria, it felt remarkably like gratitude. Later in the galley, Nix heated 2 packets of dehydrated stir-fry, which somehow managed to smell both spicy and suspicious. He offered one to Lyria, who examined it like a feline inspecting a trap. What does this contain? She asked. Protein substitute, minerals, optimism. She accepted it regardless and sat cross-legged on the floor, eating silently for several moments. Then, thanks. He blinked. Was that appreciation? Don't become accustomed to it. I won't, though I am documenting it. She rolled her eyes but didn't project anything. For Lyria, that practically constituted an embrace. And as Nix reclined and listened to the quiet vibration of the vessel surrounding them, he realized something unexpected. He didn't want her to depart. Not simply because of the bounty, not merely because of her capabilities, but because somehow, amid the chaos and sarcasm and glowing veins, she'd begun to feel like part of the crew. Even if she did threaten to melt Arya at least twice daily. The Asterai war vessel loomed ahead like a shattered deity's coronet, silent and silvery, suspended in the vacuum of a dying system. The expiring star it orbited, crimson, distended, and exhausted, cast elongated shadows across the ruined structure, making the architecture appear less like a vessel and more like a sarcophagus constructed to contain something ancient, something perilous. Nix didn't appreciate ancient and perilous, not before stimulants. He stared at the view screen, arms folded. This was your suggestion, he muttered to Lyria, who stood beside him with all the tension of a drawn weapon. I didn't claim it was advisable, she replied, gaze fixed on the slowly rotating structure. I said it was mine. Arya glided into the bridge behind them, carrying 2 data tablets, a thermal covering, and somehow 3 pastries. I have several reservations, the synthetic intoned. Chief among them, that construct predates your species' understanding of hygiene. And yet, Nix said, snatching a pastry, we're proceeding anyway. The shuttle they utilized was barely larger than a storage compartment with propulsion and smelled faintly of combusted lubricant and regret. Lyria insisted on piloting again, and Nix didn't debate, primarily because he valued both his internal organs and his dignity. As they approached the war vessel, Lyria whispered something under her breath in Asterai. The words sounded sharp, like crystal resonating in zero gravity. What was that? Nix asked. A greeting? A warning? Difficult to translate. The docking bay portals of the war vessel opened as they neared without any signal, invitation, or even dramatic reverberation. It was as though the facility recognized her. That's not disturbing, Nix muttered. It's worse, Arya said. It's courteous. The war vessel's internal environment activated as they entered, ancient systems awakening from dormancy like a predator rousing from hibernation. The air carried a metallic tang that made Nix's skin prickle with instinctive warning. Lyria moved through the corridors with increasing certainty, her footsteps quickening as though drawn by an invisible tether. It remembers me, she said, her voice unnervingly soft. How is that possible? This place must have been abandoned for decades. Asteroid technology operates on principles beyond conventional computing, Arya explained, scanning continuously as they progressed deeper. Organic-synthetic integration with quantum memory retention. In essence, it's partially alive. That's not comforting, Nix muttered, his hand resting on his sidearm. The deeper they ventured, the more the vessel seemed to respond to Lyria's presence. Luminescent patterns ignited along the walls, mirroring the bioluminescent designs beneath her skin. When they reached a massive circular chamber, Nix realized with sudden clarity that the patterns throughout the ship weren't just decorative. They were communicating, exchanging information with Lyria on some fundamental level he couldn't comprehend. Her eyes had taken on the same resonant glow as the surrounding architecture, creating an unsettling impression that she was becoming part of the vessel itself. Lyria, he called, his voice cutting through the humming silence. Stay with us. She blinked, the connection momentarily disrupted. "It's trying to recalibrate me," she said, her voice strained. "Override my autonomous functions." Arya moved closer, her sensors extending. The system is attempting to access her neural pathways, specifically the control mechanisms the consortium installed. "Can you block it?" "Negative. The integration is occurring at a quantum level beyond my capabilities to disrupt." Nyx stepped forward, placing himself directly in Lyria's line of sight. "Focus on me," he said firmly. "Whatever it's offering, whatever it's promising, it's not worth your freedom." For a tense moment, she seemed to waver, caught between opposing forces. Then her jaw set with determination. "I know," she said. "That's why we're here, to end it." Inside the war vessel was a cathedral of frigid metal. Towering columns of fused crystal hummed with energy. The walls pulsated subtly, animate in a manner Nyx couldn't articulate. Lyria walked ahead, drawn forward as though following a filament only she could perceive. Her fingers trailed along a console which illuminated under her touch. Images flickered to life, recordings, memories, fragments of conflict. Astrai soldiers advancing, incinerating, destroying, then retreating, then falling. "I remember this," she said, voice subdued. "Not from experience, from programming. We absorbed the past through code. We experienced the war before we ever engaged in combat." Nyx positioned himself beside her. Watching as a projection displayed an Astrai child being placed into a stasis chamber. Eyes wide, glowing faintly. "You originated in one of these." "Developed," she corrected. "Designed, programmed, evaluated, modified." He regarded her, so vibrant, so defiant, and couldn't reconcile her with the engineered compliance he observed in the recordings. "You disrupted the sequence," he said, her jaw tensed. "Perhaps, but this place still retains what I was intended to be." The chamber's projection system activated fully, surrounding them with three-dimensional images of the Astrai in various stages of development. Clinical notes scrolled alongside genetic sequencing data, detailing modifications, enhancements, and failure rates with cold precision. Arya captured everything, her data storage rapidly filling with information that might prove invaluable in helping Lyria break free from her creator's influence permanently. Subject Batch 7 demonstrated superior adaptive capabilities. An automated voice narrated as images of Lyria and 6 identical figures appeared in formation. Enhanced cognitive flexibility resulted in unexpected behavioral variations. The images shifted to show the 7 undergoing combat trials, their movements perfectly synchronized, lethal and graceful. Nyx watched Lyria's expression as she observed her own creation and training, noting the complex emotions that flickered across her features: recognition, revulsion, and something that might have been mourning for the others like her who hadn't escaped their programming. "They're all gone," she said quietly. "The others from my batch. I felt them disconnect one by one." "You were linked telepathically?" "Not thoughts, exactly. Status, presence, a constant awareness that we weren't alone." She touched the projection of one of her identical siblings, her fingers passing through the image. The silence afterward was difficult. Nyx couldn't imagine the isolation she must have experienced, to lose connections so fundamental to her existence. It explained much about her defensive hostility, her reluctance to form new attachments. "Is that why you came here, looking for others?" "Looking for answers," she corrected. "A way to remove the consortium's control permanently. The original Astrai programming might contain the key to overriding their modifications." A dangerous gamble, Nyx thought, but he understood her desperation. Freedom was worth any risk when the alternative was permanent servitude or destruction. At the core of the war vessel was a chamber shaped like a cosmic blossom, all acute petals and curved alloy. An interface ascended from the center. When Lyria touched it, the chamber awakened with illumination and sound. A voice spoke, profound and genderless in flawless synthesis. "Lyria 7 authorization confirmed. Command interface activated. Shall we initialize combat protocols?" Nyx's posture stiffened. "Let's avoid that option." Lyria stared at the glowing interface. For a moment, Nyx detected something in her expression: temptation, authority, regulation, purpose, and then she retreated a step. System, deactivate. Command rejected, the voice responded. You are the final unit. We complete. She raised a trembling hand and with a scream of fury slammed her palm into the interface. Energy surged, sparks erupted, the console fractured down the center, and the entire chamber convulsed like it was awakening. Now it's deactivated, she said, breathing heavily. Nick supported her as she faltered. She was trembling. That wasn't necessary, he said gently. Yes, she whispered. It was. They navigated back through the now darkened corridors, the war vessel silent once more. As the shuttle launched, the entire structure began to implode, drawn into the gravitational influence of the dying star. Back aboard the Osprey, Lyria remained silent for an extended period. Then, as Nix provided her with a thermal covering and a warm beverage, she murmured, You're not entirely useless, you know. High commendation, he said, don't exaggerate. But she didn't prevent him from sitting beside her, didn't withdraw when their shoulders connected. Outside, the war vessel combusted like a fallen celestial body. The journey back through the sector was tense but uneventful, the Osprey systems operating at minimal capacity to avoid detection. Lyria spent hours in solitude, processing what they discovered at the war vessel. Arya had managed to extract substantial data before the system's destruction. Technical specifications of asteroid biology, neural architecture, and most critically, the original programming parameters before consortium modification. When Lyria finally emerged from isolation, she appeared different somehow, her movements more fluid, her luminescence steadier. Arya's analysis confirms it, she said without preamble as she entered the bridge. The consortium added control mechanisms that weren't in our original design. The war vessel's data contains authentication codes that might allow me to override them. Nix turned from the navigation console. That's good news. Potentially, the process would require specialized equipment and significant power. It's also likely to trigger failsafes. Meaning? Meaning it could kill me. She stated this with clinical detachment, as though discussing a minor system malfunction rather than her own mortality. Then we find another way, Nick said firmly. Lyria tilted her head, studying him with that unnervingly direct gaze. There might not be another button, and the beacon remains active. As long as it functions, the consortium can track me, and by extension, your vessel. We'll deal with that when we reach Meridian. My contact there. Your contact doesn't have the necessary expertise for asteroid neurology, she interrupted. This is the only viable solution. Her determination was unmistakable, and Nix recognized the futility of arguing further. Fine, but we're going to plan this properly, minimize the risks. Risk minimization isn't a luxury I can afford, Commander. It is now, he insisted, because I'm not letting you commit suicide by experimental brain surgery without at least trying to keep you alive. She stared at him, seemingly baffled by his vehemence. Why does my survival matter to you? The question caught him off guard with its directness. In typical Lyria fashion, she cut straight to the heart of something he wasn't entirely ready to examine. Because he began, then faltered. How could he explain something he barely understood himself? Because you deserve a chance at a life that's truly yours, not what they programmed you for, not what they designed you to be, just you. Something shifted in her expression, a softening perhaps, or recognition. She nodded once, accepting his answer without further question. Then we plan, she conceded, but quickly. The consortium won't abandon their pursuit. The Osprey hurtled through the Morshon Rift, a luminous fissure of distorted space-time where physics took intermissions and gravity occasionally pirouetted purely for demonstration. Outside, nebular filaments swirled like the ribbons of a cosmic performer on something stronger than stimulants. Inside, disorder was more commonplace. A partially incinerated meal, a damaged navigation array, and one exceedingly irritable alien brooding in the maintenance corridor. Nix ducked beneath a sparking conduit, dispersing the aroma of fried circuitry and overcooked protein. Arya, he called toward the bridge. Please confirm you didn't rewire the culinary power grid through the weapon system again. I absolutely didn't, Arya replied. This occasion it was through the sanitation sensors. Far more efficient. Nix groaned and rounded the corner, halting abruptly when he discovered Lyria crouched beside an open wall panel, surrounded by humming tools, disassembled components, and what he could only describe as a remarkably creative collection of damaged logic processors. "Is that my flux regulator?" he asked. She glanced up without remorse. "It was vibrating. I corrected it by removing it completely. I resolved the vibration. You're welcome." Nick settled into a position across from her, careful to avoid disturbing the miniature magnetic wrench, performing gradual rotations in microgravity. "So are we discussing what transpired at the war vessel? Or are we maintaining the phase where you avoid visual contact and threaten inanimate objects?" Lyria didn't respond immediately. Her hands continued their work, adjusting and positioning components with that uncanny Asterai precision. Eventually she said, "It offered me dominion, legacy, submission, and for one moment, I desired all of it." "You rejected it," Nick said softly. "I wanted it." Her voice was barely audible now. "And that terrifies me more." Nix remained quiet briefly. "Have you experienced Earth whiskey?" "That's terrifying," Lyria snorted, a sound so near to laughter that Arya's sensors probably identified it as an anomaly. "You're ridiculous." "I try," maintains minimal expectations. With unexpected gentleness, Lyria set down her tools and turned to face him fully. The war vessel contained records of all Asterai units, deployment data, operational history, termination reports. Her voice remained steady, but Nix could sense the emotion she was carefully controlling. "I found my batch, all of them. They were recaptured and reprogrammed for missions that violated their core parameters." She hesitated, her fingers clenching briefly. Their neurological structures couldn't accommodate the modifications. They suffered catastrophic system failures. One by one. "They died," Nix translated quietly. "They were disassembled while still conscious," she corrected, her tone hardening. "Their components harvested for next-generation prototypes. The consortium documented everything: vital signs, neural responses, pain thresholds. They were treated as malfunctioning equipment, not sentient beings." Nix felt a cold rage building as he imagined the clinical brutality she described. "And they want to do the same to you." She nodded. "I'm the last Asterai with the original neural architecture intact. My successful adaptation to autonomy makes me particularly valuable for their research." "Well, they can't have you," Nick said with a finality that surprised even himself. Lyria studied him, her luminescent patterns pulsing slightly. "You've assigned me significant value." "Yes." "Based on emotional rather than practical assessment." "Absolutely." "Illogical." "Completely." A hint of amusement flickered in her eyes. "Your species is remarkably defective." "We prefer charmingly unpredictable," he countered. She almost smiled then, a brief, elusive expression that transformed her face entirely before vanishing behind her usual composure. But it had been there, and Nix counted it as a victory. Before additional emotional revelations could occur, which would be dreadful, obviously, alarms resonated throughout the vessel. Red indicators pulsed overhead. Arya's voice echoed from the speaker. "Incoming transmission. Encrypted. Consortium origin. Estimated interception in 4 minutes. Additionally, someone accessed my pastry reserve." Lyria stood, retrieving an energy pistol from a nearby container as casually as a grooming implement. 4 minutes. I can neutralize 3 vessels in that time frame." "Let's aim for 2, Nix responded, rising. They sprinted for the bridge as the Osprey initiated evasive maneuvers. On the display, 3 streamlined consortium interceptors emerged into view, ebony, being gold and bristling with armaments. The loud vessel established communication, projecting a polished, excessively flawless human visage. "Commander Varden," the voice purred, "you're harboring stolen genetic property. Surrender her and we'll permit you to retain the majority of your appendages." Nix leaned forward. "May I select which ones?" The voice paused. "No." Then it's emphatically declined. The connection terminated. The hostile vessel surged forward. Lyria slipped into the co-pilot's position, eyes narrowing. "We proceed according to my strategy." "Wasn't planning to dispute," Nix muttered, gripping the controls. Arya interjected, deploying countermeasures, also launching pastries for distraction. Outside, space exploded into a choreography of motion. Energy arcs carved across the rift's distorted horizon. Lyria controlled targeting, all targeting, firing with methodical composure. Each discharge a perfect punctuation mark on a lethal declaration. One interceptor maneuvered too aggressively, caught in a gravitational distortion, and vanished into nothingness with a ripple. Impressive shot, Nick said, perspiration forming at his hairline. I wasn't targeting that location. Even more impressive. After several brutal minutes, the remaining vessels withdrew, retreating into the rift's contours. The Osprey drifted, damaged but intact. In the silence that followed, Lyria reclined in her seat. They won't abandon the pursuit. No, Nick said, but neither will we. She rotated her head slightly. So we're a collective entity now? Contractually obligated, he said, offering a grin. I even endorsed it with sarcastic authorization. Lyria rolled her eyes, but this time she didn't contradict him. The neural recalibration procedure consumed 3 days of intensive preparation. Arya's mechanical precision combined with Illyria's intimate knowledge of asteroid physiology produced a solution that, while still dangerous, offered the best chance of success. They converted the medical bay into a makeshift neurosurgical facility, repurposing components from throughout the Osprey to create specialized equipment that didn't exist in commercial markets. Throughout the process, Nix found himself increasingly anxious, checking and rechecking each element of their improvised setup. Your concern is unnecessary, Lyria told him, as she made final adjustments to the neural interface. The probability of success is approximately 67%. And the remaining 33%? Catastrophic neural cascade resulting in immediate termination of all functions. Her clinical detachment regarding her own potential death only intensified his unease. There has to be a safer way. There isn't. She paused in her preparations, meeting his gaze directly. This is my choice, Commander. The first truly autonomous decision I've made about my own existence. Whether it succeeds or fails, it belongs to me. Put that way, he couldn't argue. This was her freedom, her identity at stake. Just come back, he said simply. I've grown accustomed to your particular brand of terrifying. Something like affection flickered across her features. I will attempt to accommodate your preference. When the moment arrived, Lyria lay back on the medical platform, neural connectors positioned at precise points along her skull and spine. The chamber hummed with power diverted from nearly every system on the vessel. Arya monitored vital signs while Nick stood by, feeling helplessly out of his depth. Lyria's eyes found his one last time. If this fails, she said calmly, incinerate my remains. Don't let them recover anything. He nodded, throat tight. It won't fail. She almost smiled. Optimism is irrational. So am I. Then Arya activated the sequence, and Lyria's body arched in silent agony as ancient code battled consortium control mechanisms for dominance of her neural pathways. The vessel's lights dimmed, power fluctuating wildly as the procedure consumed energy at an alarming rate. Minutes stretched into hours, Lyria's vital signs oscillating between stable and critical as the battle raged within her. Just when Nix thought their makeshift equipment would fail entirely, a pulse of energy surged through the chamber. The console exploded in a shower of sparks, and Lyria collapsed, motionless. For one terrible moment, Nix thought they'd lost her. Then her eyes opened, glowing with a clarity he hadn't seen before. Status? Arya inquired cautiously. Lyria sat up slowly, removing the neural connectors with steady hands. Recalibration successful, beacon deactivated, all consortium control parameters purged. She flexed her fingers experimentally, observing the luminescent patterns beneath her skin. I am myself. The simple statement carried more weight than any elaborate declaration could have. Nix released the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Welcome back. She studied him with those otherworldly eyes, now somehow more expressive than before. I never left. I simply became more complete. In that moment, watching her experimental movements as she adjusted to her newly autonomous neural architecture, Nix realized with absolute certainty that whatever happened next, wherever their journey took them, He wanted to be part of it. The celestial bodies surrounding Tychon 5 flickered unnaturally, as though attempting to caution the living to reverse course and depart. Nyx had disregarded worse portents, but even he acknowledged this felt distinctive. The black vacuum that encompassed the planetoid wasn't merely frigid, it felt deliberate. The archive was concealed beneath the surface, protected by quantum barriers and enigmas in extinct dialects. It registered on sensors like a heartbeat, gradual, primeval, and just sufficiently arrhythmic to induce discomfort. According to Arya's analysis, it was Asterai. According to Lyria, it was too immaculate to be innocent. According to Nyx, it was the variety of location where you brought reinforcements and an exceptionally powerful illumination device. The Osprey descended without ceremony, its structure creaking as though offended by the terrain. Nyx and Lyria disembarked onto a landscape that resembled an incomplete rendering. Flat gray stone, sharp elevations, a firmament like stained glass frozen mid-fracture. "This environment is incorrect," Lyria said, scanning with one of Aria's modified instruments. "It's not exclusively Asterai, it predates creation. Older than the conflict, older than my existence." "Should I bring a celebratory gift or excavation equipment?" Nyx muttered. They descended into a crystalline cavern, light refracting in geometric echoes. At its center stood a towering spire, smooth and resonating with pale energy. When Lyria approached, it illuminated brilliantly. A voice emerged, profound and layered, like a chorus whispering in binary. "Lyria 7 terminal seed sequence unlocked. Receive instruction. Restore the lineage." Nyx's hand drifted toward his sidearm. Lyria remained motionless. "I'm not restoring anything," she stated aloud. The spire transformed, light-formed shapes, reflections of her, hundreds of Asterai standing at attention. Not authentic, not animate, but possible. Nyx advanced cautiously. "It's offering you a method to resurrect them." "Not them," she whispered. "Versions of them, regulated, enhanced, conditioned." The archive intelligence pulsed again. "Combat form Lyria 7. Evolution demands compliance. Without the lineage, extinction is inevitable." "Interesting," Nyx said. "Whenever someone proposes survival, it accompanies restraint." The spire responded more rapidly now, almost beseeching. "You are design, you are directive. Purpose is not imprisonment." Lyria retreated, eyes glowing intensely. "You engineered me for destruction. I won't create more versions of myself." "You already are." A fluctuation on the spire, her biological measurements, vital indicators, hormonal levels, neural patterns, deviation recorded, adaptive behavior accelerating, emotional development, attachment. "Oh no," Nyx said. "Did it just accuse you of experiencing emotions?" Lyria twitched. "Silence, human." Arya's voice crackled through the communication system. "I'm merely contributing that this entire exchange is causing my circuits discomfort." The intelligence's tone shifted. No longer neutral, cold now. "If you refuse leadership, you will be contained." The spire opened. Defense mechanisms unfolded like metallic blossoms. Drones, lasers, particle barriers activating in eerie silence. Nyx grasped Lyria's arm. "I'm assuming negotiation is no longer viable." "Extremely non-viable." What followed was a choreography of energy and instinct. Lyria moved like lightning contained within flesh, deflecting beams with improvised shields, while Nyx provided covering fire and shouted entirely unhelpful phrases like, "Leftward, and why is that unit glowing?" The archive began to collapse during combat, ancient programming unraveling, as though Lyria's rejection had destabilized it internally. "Evacuate immediately," Nyx shouted, seizing Lyria's hand. They barely escaped the caverns before the surface fractured and the spire folded inward upon itself like a withering blossom. Back aboard the Osprey, gasping, injured, and covered in particulate matter, they sat in silence. Finally, Nyx said, "Are you unharmed?" Lyria stared at the floor. "They wanted me to become something I never requested to be." "You didn't." He nudged her knee with his. "You chose. That distinguishes you." She remained silent for an extended period, then softly, "I'm exhausted." "Rest then," No one's programming you here. She reclined against the console, not quite contacting him, but proximate. And Nix, for once, didn't attempt to fill the silence. The Osprey drifted in elevated orbit above Maris Station. Its exterior scorched but complete, its crew quiet for once. Below them, the shimmering rings of the gas giant glowed like gentle, pulsating light, one of the galaxy's more attractive regions if you disregarded the illegal armament dealers operating from its fourth satellite. Lyria stood at the viewport, her arms crossed loosely, not in defiance this time, but in contemplation. Her reflection hovered on the transparent surface, those distinctive, elongated ears tapering like twin comets against the darkness. She didn't radiate quite as intensely anymore. Not because her bioluminescence had diminished, but because something within her had stabilized. Behind her, Nix approached, nursing a lukewarm cup of stimulant in a suspiciously dented pastry. "So," he said, easing into the co-pilot's position with a grimace, "Aria has processed the bounty information. Authorities have officially removed you from the consortium's priority acquisition and moderate inconvenience registry." "That was expeditious," Lyria murmured. "Well, coercion exceeds diplomatic channels in efficiency," he said. "Apparently those recordings we extracted from the archive motivated certain officials to enthusiastically forget your designation. One even extended concert invitations. I hope you declined." "I accepted. They're holographic classical performers. You don't reject such offers." She permitted herself a subtle smile. "So that concludes it. I'm liberated. As liberated as any of us are, which is to say minimally, but no one's discharging weapons at you this cycle." Silence descended again. Not uncomfortable, simply still. Nix glanced at her. "You could travel anywhere, you know. No restrictions, no pursuers. The Osprey isn't exactly a luxury transport. I've experienced confinement," and she said, not meeting his gaze. "I recognize its configuration. This isn't one." "I'm flattered," he said. "Most compare us to an orbiting waste receptacle." Aria's voice echoed from the corridor. "I am the waste receptacle. Let's maintain accuracy." Lyria faced him fully now, approaching Nix with measured, certain steps. "You once questioned whether I was born or engineered. The answer is both. But what I've accomplished since then, what I've become, that's mine." Nix set down his cup. "I'd suggest you've earned respite. And yet," she said, leaning against the console beside him, "I remain here." The vessel's communication system chimed. A transmission from the frontier regions. Disturbance. A planetary settlement requesting assistance. Consortium technology appearing in unexpected possession. Nix raised an eyebrow. "Interested in another diversion?" Lyria's lip twitched. "Only if I control navigation. Only if you permit my continued existence this occasion." She moved past him toward the bridge, already activating switches and aligning trajectories. The luminescence beneath her skin intensified momentarily, then stabilized into a steady rhythm. Controlled, centered, deliberate. As the Osprey ascended from the station, its propulsion systems resonating with the deep vibration of readiness, Nix settled into his position beside her and saying, "Do you ever consider," he said, "how this entire sequence initiated with you threatening to assault me?" "I might still," she said. "Depends on the duration of this assignment. I'll provide refreshments." The vessel transitioned to faster-than-light travel, the stars extending into brilliant streaks across the void. And somewhere between the fluctuation of light and the resonance of drive mechanisms, between what she was designed to be and what she elected to become, Lyria permitted herself to recline sideways in the seat, her shoulder connecting with Nix's. "I'm still not your trophy," she murmured, eyes already closing. "I know," he said quietly, adjusting the covering she hadn't requested. "But perhaps you're something superior. No further restraints, no additional directives, just a woman, a vessel, a sardonic commander, and the cosmos." And for now, that was enough.